Joining me to talk more about these numbers and what they really mean is Brandon Andrews, Executive Director for Inside America, and Steve Pruitt. He's the former Democratic Staff Director for the House Committee on Budget. Steve, well, this question goes to both of you gentlemen. Thank you very much for being on the show. It's hard for people to understand. First of all, to get the story straight, the deficit is less than expected. So it's not a surplus, as I've been reading in some other media outlets. So it's less on the credit card. Now, explain to us how that is possible when we've heard all this doom and gloom news over the last couple of years.
Well, I'll take a crack at that first. I think there were several actions that have already been taken. First, in fiscal year 2012, we cut $1.2 trillion in the budget deal between President Obama and Congress. We came back last year. We did an additional tax bill that raised about $616 billion. And then we've had sequestration, which has kicked in roughly another $85 billion. And we're right now somewhere in the range of about $3 trillion worth of overall spending cuts and revenue increases combined. So we brought down government
spending
government impact on the economy substantially in the last 2.5 years already.
And sometimes people ask, well, is Washington working with all the kind of near misses in terms of fiscal cliff and all of that? And this is kind of evidence that although it may not be done in the way we'd like for it to be done, there is some progress being made.
I mean, in a weird way, it has worked out, I guess, in part because of the economy, because of this sequestration issue, and what I've been reading is higher tax revenues, which either comes from individuals making more money or corporations making more money.
If you look at the stock market and where it's been for really the past year, it's been in an upswing, and of course, corporate revenues reflect that.
So we have an opportunity.
Phillip, you also have to remember the tax deal that was cut last year brought about an increase in the rates for upper income earners. It also eliminated what was known as the payroll holiday on regular workers. So the combination of those two were already destined to bring in more revenues.
The current estimate from one of the sources is $650 billion in deficit for this year. And we were originally talking about upwards of nearly $1 trillion. So this gives Congress and the White House perhaps an opportunity to fix the problem, I should say at least for a slightly longer term. Do you think there's an opportunity here for Congress and the White House to work together over the next 12 to 18 months to come up with a more sustainable budget reduction plan?
Well, I'd say there's a real opportunity. I think it's going to take three elements, however. One, the one you hear from both sides, leadership, both on the part of Congress, House and Senate, and the White House. Secondly, I think it's going to take a good deal of courage, because we're still playing with numbers that one misstep and the whole thing could fall apart. So it's going to take some courage to make some decisions about some key things. And then thirdly, it's going to have to take some real structural changes as well, beyond the simple discussions about cutting Medicare, Medicaid, raising the age of Social Security.
I'm concerned that 3 steps is too many here to try to tackle them, Brandon.
Actually, it's not. They'll be done in one package, but they need all three.
Washington never fails to surprise. Brandon, you know, Congress, Republican controlled. Do the Republicans, well, they said they want to address the problem. So I'm going to give you a crack at it. How would they address this problem and take it to the next step?
Well, so I think if you look at the Republican budget, the Ryan budget that came out this past year, there's, of course, some changes to entitlements. I think the Ryan plan builds on some of the things that were done back in 1996 and applies them to some programs that weren't applied to at first. So there's savings there. And then if you look at, I'll say this, both budgets have great opportunities to save money and get us closer to fixing the problem. The real issue is going to be who has the will to not go on the attack for the other side, but actually stop and say, hey, let's find the opportunity to do it. Because there's plenty of opportunity, and I think that's the more important point.
Well, the elephant in the room is these fairly massive, government programs where you look at Social Security, you look at the interest rate payments. I mean, there's some big programs that really haven't been addressed as of yet, and I wonder how controversial will it be when both sides, whether it's the White House, Democrats or Republicans, will they have the courage to address this issue?
Well, Phillip, I think it's important for people to understand there really are two issues here. One is the deficit, which equates to essentially how much money do I have to spend this month. And then there's the debt, which should be viewed more in terms of the long term. If I'm going to buy a house, can I afford a $300,000, $500,000, $1 million home? Because I'm going to pay that off over time. We have a deficit issue that I think can be addressed fairly simply. We've already done things that already meet or exceed what the projected deficit for 2014 is already. We've already hit that 650 mark with several other moves that have been done. The real issue is what do you do about the $15 trillion long-term debt, and what kind of restructuring do you have to do? And you can do and make changes in these programs. There are going to be winners and losers, of course, but you can make changes in not only the three basic entitlement programs, but you also have to accept the fact that there are other programs in the federal portfolio that are also, quote, entitlements.
It's complex. Brandon, I'll let you have the last answer to this, and a similar question again. Does Washington have the courage to address these issues, as Steve has mentioned?
Well, the issue is that over the decades, really, both sides have gone back and forth and said when someone wants to trim, reform, or cut an entitlement program, it means they don't care about the most vulnerable populations in our country. And so I think with President Obama and Mr. Ryan coming out with entitlement reform in their budgets for FY14, it gives the opportunity to stop that back and forth and to actually come to some kind of resolution. I think the most important point for people in Washington to understand is that protecting a program or ensuring that the vulnerable populations are protected is about ensuring that these programs are sustainable over time, not about protecting what you have right now.
Gentlemen, I wish we had more time. Steve Pruitt, Brandon Andrews, thank you very much for joining us on this basically a very complex topic. Sure. Maybe both sides will take credit for the less deficit.